practice being a Southerner for the last 15 years. I know that there's one thing he's particularly proud of if you watch sports and you were involved in watching the NCAA. UCLA winning the national championship was done in no small part to a member of his family, his son, Mark, who is the assistant coach there, got a lot of TV time at the end of that thing, hugging Jim Herrick as they were running across the court after they won. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Joe Gottfried.
Thank you, Dr. Appling. First off, it's a pleasure for me to be here. I've had the opportunity to come over here on different occasions in previous years, and I've really enjoyed it. And seeing Colleen here, I have not seen her for a few years, and knew she was over here and doing an outstanding job for you. Colleen, really good to see you. I took the path, I know some of you are, the careers that you're sports medicine or going into coaching or going into maybe academic advising or athletic training or athletic administration, et cetera, like that. I think there are a lot of opportunities today. I began my route not to be an athletic administrator when I started out in coaching. I spent 8 years coaching at the high school level, and then when I got to the college level, it was starting to wear on me a little bit. For 7 years, I was a basketball coach at Ashland College, and when I did not have an assistant, and I was teaching a full-time load in recruiting, and it started to wear after about a period of 5 or 6 years where I was getting, physically whipped, trying to do everything. Then I had an opportunity to go to Southern Illinois University as the head basketball coach, and kind of a breath of fresh air, where I just coached and began working with just 12, 14 student athletes. But like many coaches, I ended up getting terminated in my contract after 3 years of a 4-year contract. So that was the first time in my career I experienced what it was like to be fired. And for a long period of time, that was difficult to even use that word, because my whole career was going into coaching, and I didn't know what I wanted to do beyond that. And I mentioned to Dr. Applin, I looked at real estate for about 4 months, and then I got cold feet and saw an ad in the Chronicle of Higher Education where there was an opening as an assistant athletic director at South Alabama. I recruited all over the country, but I'd never been to Mobile, so I had no idea, what the area was like. And we came down here, and it ended up to be really a tremendous move for me, because I didn't really want to divorce myself from athletics, and now I am involved with all, phases of our program. We're up to 16 Division I sports, 8 for men and 8 for women, and I'll touch base a little bit on gender equity and the Title IX aspect of my position. But also that there are a lot of positions today, and again, I'm not specifically knowing what you're looking into, but academic advising is a wide open area today. I took over in the 84-85 academic year, and the first person I hired was an elderly lady, and I hired her as a part-time academic advisor. And since that time, we now have 4 full-time people and 2 graduate assistants, and they do nothing but academic advising with 200 plus student athletes. It's really a great area to go into today. Another area is a wide open area is in compliance. We have our compliance officer is full-time. Actually, he's 3/4 compliance and 1/4 academic. And I think the 2 positions go hand in hand. But the way the rules are today, and perhaps you've seen the NCAA rule book, I wish I'd have brought it, but we used to have it, when I say used to, 5 or 6 years ago, it was probably the size of a Bible. And they put a committee together to try to condense that and to make it so it's easier to read and a little bit easier to understand. They made it probably 5 times the size that it is now. And you really need a person in compliance, touching base and understanding. For about 10 years, I was the compliance person as well as the athletic director, and so I have a pretty good understanding of what the rules are, where to look for them, etc. But it's gotten to a point now where you do need somebody in it full time, so there are opportunities today, male or female, to get into compliance. I see it advertised a lot. I see a lot of people heading in that direction. Now, unfortunately, in most instances, you only have 1 compliance officer per institution. Maybe he or she would have an assistant, where in academic advising you're talking about, now we have 4 plus 2 graduate assistants. We are very large in the number we have per student population in terms of our student athletes. Many of the football institutions do not have as many as we have, but we put a priority on that area. But still, there are 4 people in our program, so again, the opportunities there. The opportunities in the position that I'm in are there. You see more and more institutions now are adding more and more staff in terms of associate athletic directors, assistant athletic directors, breaking down different responsibilities. Another major area to go into is fundraising. Now, in the area of development, we have 3 people that are involved in our development. One, they're actually 2 full-time, and then we have 1 retired person that works part-time. But we're at a point in our program, it's difficult to get more people hired in that area because restrictions on budget, and still difficult to convince a budget committee that if we add 2 or 3 more people, they'll increase the sales and that'll help, you know, the revenue brought in when budgetary situations are tight. So what we're looking at right now, we're borrowing a model that Wake Forest University has and Clemson University is doing, and that's where they're hiring outside people. In other words, we're looking at talking with our development officer right now, a young lady, she's in charge of that program, to see if she would start up a company outside. And we would have to go through all the bureaucracy that you have to go through in a public institution, and we're trying to work out some financial area, the financial area. Also, I'm trying to protect her in the state system, that she doesn't lose her retirement. She's got 7 or 8 years in the state retirement system. You need 10 to be vested. I don't want her to lose that. So we either try to work something in a contract where if it doesn't work out, she could come back to her original position. But by doing it outside, she would be able to hire more people on a part-time basis, more people on a commission basis, because when you get into university systems, it's difficult to get a university system to approve commission type situation, because we have development officers in a hospital, in our alumni office, admissions, and if you do it for one area, you almost end up having to do it for other areas. So it would allow us to do it more if it was, you know, an external type program. They would still be under, you know, our area for the most part once we could get that all worked out. But again, if you enjoy meeting people, if you enjoy selling, that is a tremendous area to go into today, because there isn't a day goes by in my position and my position of people all over the country are the same as me. You're always looking for ways to increase revenue, whether it's projects you're doing or whether it's endowed scholarships or you know, some form of fundraising. We're looking right now at if our baseball team wins the division, we're tied with Jacksonville right now. In the winner of our 10-team league will host the Sun Belt tournament. Well, that's a financial resource for us to increase revenue, because if we can have that for 4 days, you know, concessions, parking, etc. like that, we can increase our revenue. Now, we're also putting a bid in to host the NCAA regional baseball tournament. Now, I would not look at that if there wasn't a chance for us to try to generate some revenue. And in addition, it gives our baseball team a chance to play at home in the regionals, and that's a shot perhaps to go to the World Series. But the commitment on that is very high. You've got to look at a minimum to the NCAA. You make a bid. We would have to probably make a bid of $100,000, and you have to guarantee $75,000 of that. So we've been working on how many tickets we'd have to sell, how many people would be coming in outside from the other 5 institutions. It would be a 6-team tournament. You know, how much commitment we could get from the city, how much we could get from the university, how much we could get from the corporate community, to try to put it all together. And then when we put a budget together, it'll only be based on a 2-day tournament, where it's a 4-day tournament though. But you've got to base it on the fact that your team may only be in it for 2 days. And if you lose the home team, you lose the majority of the crowd. So we put the budget together based on 2 days, and anything over 2 days, hopefully we would be able to generate more resources. So the resource area is every day. Title IX, gender equity. It's gender equity. Probably 4 years ago I had never heard the term gender equity, maybe 5 years ago, I can't recall, and all of a sudden the Big Ten got together and they started talking about gender equity, and then we attended meetings. Title IX I'm very familiar with. Gender equity is a situation where we're not really sure. When I say we are not sure, I read the NCAA public manual or publications that you may receive in the different articles around the country. But what they're saying in gender equity, what it's supposed to mean, that whatever the student enrollment is, we have 55% of our student population is female. Therefore, 55% of our student athlete population should be female, as well as 55% of our budget should be geared towards the female population. We're not near that. We're not far from that. We've got matching sports. When you match tennis, golf, basketball, cross country, track, soccer, you have the same number of participants. Now in volleyball, women's volleyball, you may have 11 to 13 student athletes. and where you get into baseball, you've got a higher number, so that throws us completely off is the baseball area. Now, we've gone to our baseball coach, and this is the sad part of the gender equity, what the concept of the rule is. We have 49 to 53 student athletes that participate in baseball. We're at the maximum scholarship-wise, which is 11.1, okay? Now, we don't give 11.1 scholarships to 11 people. We divide that up amongst about 23 to 24 student athletes. That means the remaining 25 to 30 are walk-ons. We do not give them anything. Now, we have to decrease the number of walk-ons that will participate in our baseball program. Now, these are student athletes that buy their room and board meal tickets, they pay their tuition, but the way the law reads, you have got to decrease the number of participants, whether they're walk-ons or scholarships. So we will probably go down to about 31 or 32. We will probably not be in compliance in the true sense of the word compliance until we add women's softball. Will probably be the next sport. We just added women's soccer. And so that matched us up with our soccer program because we were completely, well, not completed, but we were out of balance. But we have baseball, and softball in the state of Alabama is slow pitch. And once it becomes the, the fast pitch, then it will become where there will be pressure put on us to start women's soccer. In fact, we had always looked at women's soccer. I've coached college soccer for 2 years, so always had an interest in it. But we weren't in a situation a few years ago to begin it financially. I had a young lady come in my office in April, and she had asked me if we were interested in starting women's soccer, and I said, not really, and mainly because there wasn't women's soccer in the Southeast, and our league did not have women's soccer, so you have to look at the scheduling problem as well. And then about a month later, Auburn was sued by the women's club soccer team at Auburn, and they were forced to start women's soccer. And they had to go into it financially in a major way, build a facility, etc. So it was about 2 weeks later, she walked into my office and she said, "Are you interested in women's soccer?" I said, "Of course we're interested in women's soccer." And we did. We started it within 4 or 5 months. And had we not started it, we would have been sued, because I had gotten a letter from this young lady, and it was copied to the attorney that sued Auburn. So we knew that eventually we were going to have to go into it, and we were going to go into it. We just weren't prepared financially at that point. But we jumped right into it a year ago, and we went 13-6. And what we ended up doing in terms of the coaching part, we have our men's soccer coach who's nationally well known. We're one of the probably the top 25 soccer programs in the country. And I wanted him to have access to our women's soccer program as well. So we created a position and called it Director of Soccer, and put him in charge of both men and women. Then we hired a male to coach our men's soccer team, and we hired a female to coach our women's soccer team. So in reality, they are head coaches, the two people there. He oversees both programs. He works with both programs, so he has access to working with our young ladies as well. It's really worked tremendously for us, because there are times that we have 3 coaches with both sports. We have one facility, and it doesn't conflict in terms of practice. We've got lights, so it's really worked out to our advantage. We've got one coach for our golf team, and ultimately we will hire a female for that. We have not, and I've been in tune to this gender equity Title IX thing, but we've had difficulty, hiring, in terms of some coaches. We had a volleyball opening a few years ago, and it was a woman's coach, and we did not retain her. So I'd made up my mind we were going to hire a woman for the volleyball position. And I had people call me and say, "You need to look at the coach, he's a male from LSU." I said, "I'm not going to look at any males, we're going to hire a female for that position." And so they talked to me, and I had a good friend that was head coach at Michigan State, and she had coached with us at South Alabama. And so I said, "Okay," she kept prodding me to do this. I said, "Okay, we'll talk to him." So before we brought him in, I had 2 young ladies from our volleyball team that were on our selection committee. And I told them at that point that we wanted to bring in a female for the volleyball position, and they felt, the 2 of them, that they wanted the best possible coach, not necessarily, male or female. So we brought 4 people in, 1 male, 3 females, and we had 3 outstanding females and 1 outstanding male. And all 4 of them met with the committee, and then they all 4 met with the volleyball team as a group. And the volleyball team and the selection committee unanimously wanted the male. So I went to our attorney, I said, "Can we do this? I mean, I want to make sure we're protected." And again, the law being that if he was the best qualified candidate in terms of the research and et cetera like that, you can hire the male. So we went ahead and hired the male. It's worked out perfectly. We had a opening for women's basketball recently, and we had a male that was in that position before. And again, I was determined that we're going to find a female. And our girls in Mass wanted to have a female as the head women's basketball coach. I had visited with them. We were on a national hunt, interviewed 3 people, and hired an outstanding coach from Arkansas State that was 8-0 against us, and so I had a chance to observe her teams many times. Very well coached, very, very enthusiastic, and I think she's going to take us, hopefully to another level. But we've got 1 coach for our tennis program, a male, and we'll be at a point, I hope, within a 2 to 3 year period where we'll have a female coach for our women's tennis and a female coach for our golf program. Again, if they're the best qualified. So I know now we're protected by the law too, in that if it's the best qualified person, we can hire that person. But again, being in a position I'm in, I would prefer probably to have a female in those positions. My role, and if you come into this position at some time in the future or the assistant, I just jotted some things down that I've learned since I've been into it. And I think number one, public relations is so critical. I mean, you've got to be untuned to what's happening in all your programs, but the public relations, the community relations, understanding the political arena, probably if I can give you any advice at all, whatever position you go into in intercollegiate athletics or whatever it may be, you must learn to be in tune with the political arena. I think that's so critical. So critical to be able to get things done, both within your university community as well as in your own community. And I spend a lot of time in the community with people that support our program. I spend time with people that are on the council in Mobile. I know the mayor very, very well. I mean, I've served on committees that he's asked me to, even though I knew that I didn't really have time to do that. I've gotten involved in various things in the Mobile community, but I don't mind doing it. I think if you mind doing that, or if you have a problem with that, it really will come across, but I don't mind doing that because I've always enjoyed being around people. But it is time consuming, but it does put you in a position at some point in time where you're going to call on favors for your programs, etc. The Civic Center a few years ago, the city was in a situation where the building in Mobile Civic Center was in horrible condition. Chairback seats were old. They were on 3-inch risers. If I sat behind Dr. Applin and I couldn't see. I mean, 3.5-inch rise, you just could not see at all. Lighting was poor and the floor was bad. So we made a proposal to the city to, if we're going to try to host a tournament here at some time in the future, a Sunbelt tournament, we had to get better facilities down there. Not the threat that we'd ever build a building on campus. That was never used because we did not have a playing facility big enough to compete on our campus. And it came down to where the voting, they needed 5 votes to be able to get the $2 or $3 million appropriated the next day. I was called by one of the city council members on Monday. If there's any help that I could give towards getting the 5th vote, I made 2 calls to people that were very involved in our program that I had developed a good relationship with, that had a good relationship with our campus, and we got 3 votes. The next day it was voted 7-0, and they appropriated $2.8 million, and we got almost a new facility. We brought the Bay Sharks in, a pro baseball team, and I knew once you bring another, professional, for example, we had no competition for the most part in terms of the corporate dollar. We didn't have any pro teams in Mobile. There was no other Division I program. And so Mobile University and Spring Hill do not go out into the corporate community like we need to do. So for the most part, we didn't have the dollar competition. And I knew if a pro baseball team or a pro organization comes in, it could have some ultimate effect because there's only so many dollars when you go to Coca-Cola to be able to distribute around. So worked with the city to try to see what they could do, and then we worked with the Bay Sharks. I spent a lot of time talking to other institutions around the country that had some relationship with pro teams coming on our campus, and we were not going to let them come on unless we benefited. We had to benefit financially, and we had to be in total control of that. And so I didn't want to reinvent the wheel, so we were able to find out all this information. So they came in, they utilized our facility, and their seasons do not conflict at all. When we're finished, they'll be starting up. We worked out where we had the fence signs, advertising, where we were generating about $45,000 per year on fence signs when we would go out into the corporate community. In other words, we'd go to IBM and we'd say, you know, for $8,000 you get so many tickets, you get a sign at the baseball park, you get so many spots on radio, television, etc. So we said, we'll give you the fence sign. That's yours, but you've got to give us $65,000 lease money, in addition to some other lease money. So we get about $85,000 to $90,000 from the Bay Sharks. We don't worry about advertising on the fence now. What they did, very wise thing they did, the signs were that big, where you had one, like if this was the billboard, we would sell it for, I think ours was like $1,800. They cut it in half and selling each one for $3,600. And but they can sell the fact that we have 30 dates, they have 50 dates. No, so the advertiser will get 80 dates at the ballpark. So they made out financially, we made out financially. They put a new scoreboard in. That was part of the contract, and so it's a $50,000 scoreboard. We needed one. If the Bay Sharks leave tomorrow, the scoreboard is ours. If they leave tomorrow, they provided the second tier of advertising on the board. I mean, they built the second tier. If they leave tomorrow, then we have both tiers to be able to sell. They made some improvements in the seating. We're negotiating right now, and this is, you know, we're kind of at a deadlock. They need more seats. They'd like to have 2,000 more seats in the park. Now, the problem with that is in college baseball, and especially in the spring season, we seat about 3,800. Good nights we'll draw 3,000, some nights 1,300, but college baseball, for the most part, we're probably a top 20 in terms of draws. A lot of ballparks that are building on college campus right now are building around 2,500 seats. I think Alabama is 2,600 or 2,700 seats, so you're not putting 5,000 and 6,000 seats in a college baseball park. Pro baseball, they get the summer, the kids are not having to worry about go to school the next day, they sell beer, so they have a lot more opportunities to draw a lot more people. But the problem we have, we don't need 2,000 more seats, so my feeling, if we're going to put 2,000 more seats in there and you're going to pay for it, we've got to benefit financially from that also, rather than just you put the seats in or the city provide the seats. You know, our program, I'm in that situation where I've got to look for money all the time to be able to generate with 16 sports. If our basketball program is down, our basketball program's been down for the last 3 years, our crowds are down. If your crowds are down, your contributions outside are down, so that's where, you know, I mean, the Bay Sharks thing has been a big plus for us. I mean, we're looking at $80,000, $90,000 a year, and that thing could increase. Now, AA baseball, if the Bay Sharks left tomorrow, AA baseball would come to Mobile in a second. But selfishly, you know, unselfishly in the area, I'd love to have AA baseball. It's a better brand of baseball, etc. Selfishly, I don't want AA baseball to come in our area because ultimately they'll build a park somewhere. Now, if they build a park, then there's 2 baseball parks. So we've got to try to keep the Bay Sharks here from a selfish standpoint so we can continue to generate revenue for our baseball program. We take $27,000 of that revenue and put it back into our baseball program. We did not have a baseball locker room for 3 years, and this is all part of that money, but we built an academic advising center in our baseball locker room in our present building. And we've got computers there, we've got offices, we've got study labs, but we didn't have, when we moved our baseball team out of there, we had no place to put them. And my whole idea 3 years or 4 years ago was eventually we'll get pro baseball in here and we'll figure some way to do it that way. Well, we're building a baseball locker room now. It's 4,000 square feet. It's out in left field. It's going to be a state-of-the-art baseball locker room. It's going to have offices. It's got a huge locker area. It's got a training room. We're building a Hall of Fame room, and we're building a booster room that'll be right in the front with 2 big bay windows where they can stay out there and, you know, watch the ball games or whatever. $27,000 that Bay Shark money on an annual basis will go towards the building of that program. We're trying to raise about $250,000 for it, all outside money. We're not using any university money. And we're getting very close. We'll probably be able to complete it, you know, sometime in the fall. And then our next project that we're going to try to do is that we're going to try to build a locker room for our soccer program. Our soccer team does not have a locker room. We're only 33 years old as an institution, so that's why we do not have a lot of facilities. Auburn, Alabama, I'm from Ohio, you know, Ohio State and schools like that are over 100 years old. So we're still kind of, like a young pup there, still trying to go. So facilities are not real good for us at this particular time. So we'll build a locker room. We'll try to do it similar to what we did with the Bay Sharks. The Revelers are over here playing. It's a professional soccer program, and 90% of those the participants are our former soccer players. Now, we were hoping that they would be on our campus because we got a great soccer facility. We got lights. And if they'd have come on, they'd have been able to put 1,000 more seats in. They'd have built a locker room, concession stands, restrooms, the whole thing. But politically, it wouldn't work out because of some ownership problem there and conflict of interest, so they were not able to compete on our campus. I hope maybe still at some point in time we can work the political area out to be able to bring them onto our campus. So the entrepreneur type thing that you do, in my position, you never quit looking for ways to generate the money. This is where development people come in. We've had a lot of success hiring interns. In fact, we've got young intern, Dr. Applin called me about maybe as good as we've ever had come out of the program here. And we're trying to figure a way to keep her and retain her on our staff. But many times interns that we bring in have a lot of promotion ideas, have a lot of creativity, in terms of entrepreneur things of ways to generate money. Sometimes they've been involved in programs like might have been a golf outing or an auction, or whatever like that, to try to, find ways to generate money. When I was in coaching, I thought the role of an athletic director, just to administer the programs and play golf a lot. I don't play golf at all, but it's totally changed. I think it really helps if you have a business background in many ways. I think it's as helpful or more helpful if you've done some coaching. And the reason for that is that I run into a lot of administrators in meetings around the country, and the committee that I'm on a 1 AAA or in our conference, and sometimes coaches complain a lot if a person doesn't really understand what you're going through. I mean, if you're a bean counter, like a lot of accountants are, and sometimes you got athletic directors that are coming from that area because they've got the business background. That's exactly what they end up doing. They just count beans from one side to the other, and they don't understand sometimes. I have an understanding of what a coach goes through, from a budgetary situation, from a recruiting standpoint, from a won-loss standpoint. So sometimes that's a weakness too. That's not always a strength, because sometimes they come in and they're pleading in some ways to try to find a way to get this extra recruit in, or to come up with this extra half scholarship. And I have a weakness there, and I say, okay, let me see what I can do. And that ends up putting more pressure on me. I end up putting more pressure on somebody else, and it's just a constant thing. So I'm not saying it always is a strength, but it has been a plus, in many ways, because if you know what they're going through, you're able sometimes to deal with that problem a little bit. We just hired a men's basketball coach. I've known him for a long time. He's going through some adjustments right now. For the last 20-some years, he's been coaching pro basketball, both at the NBA level and at the CBA level. He was a head basketball coach at the University of Minnesota, and he was a head basketball coach where I had coached. So a lot of the concern that people had after 22 years not coaching collegiate basketball, can he still recruit? Never had a doubt that he could recruit, because his whole life has been focused, tunnel vision, strictly has been basketball. And I knew he would attack it with a vengeance. And he was hired 3 weeks ago, and as of last night, we're on to 2 recruits, one out in California that's got it down to us and University of Hawaii and Providence. We have another one that's down between us and St. Joe's, and one that's down between us and Wisconsin. So as late as he got hired, he's still been able to get involved, but that's because of the network that he built up over the years. And I think as you enter your profession, if I can give you any advice on it, I know your administrators and your teachers have told you this too, and I mentioned the political arena, that's so critical, but networking is so critical as well. People you're going to meet on that first job you have, the second job, and on and on and on, you'll never know that you're going to run into those people again somewhere down the road. And that person may be in a position to assist you or your program, or you may be in a position to assist that person. And you never want to leave a job on a sour note either. I've seen that happen. I've seen coaches that have got fired, that have attacked that particular institution, and I felt the same way. When I got fired at Southern Illinois, I mean, I was bitter. I didn't get to complete my 4 years, and I'm glad I never did anything. from a negative standpoint, because ultimately it would have come back and hurt me in some way. Bit my lip, and I've tried to talk other people into doing the same thing. Just go on with your life. It's not going to change by being bitter, because somebody else will call that particular institution and they'll ask, et cetera, like that. No one wants to hire somebody. I'm not going to in my position. We have a staff over 60. I'm not going to hire somebody that got fired somewhere and ended up attacking or suing or whatever like that. I mean, no way. I don't know if there's an administrator around that would do that. So, you know, be cautious as you advance in your profession, that you don't do that type thing. And I know maybe legally you have to. Maybe there's a large sum of money that's out there. I'll give you another example, you know, in that where it doesn't pay to do that. My brother is the ESPN football analyst. He's been the ESPN football analyst for the last 5 years. He does all prime games on Thursday and Saturday night. He had a good run as a coach. Head coach at Cincinnati, head coach at Kansas, and then he was head coach at Pitt. In the spring of his last year at Pitt, they gave him what they called was a lifetime contract. 5 years, roll over, which means you're always going to have 5 years they fire. They even had it in the paper, evaluations, you know, lifetime. In November they fired him. And he could have been very, very bitter publicly and, you know, and attacked them, et cetera, like that. They worked the financial deal out. 2 weeks after he was fired, ESPN hired him. Had he started on a negative thing like that, I can guarantee you right now he would not be with ESPN today had he attacked them, because ESPN would feel the same as I'm saying to you up here. You're not going to go after somebody for the most part that would rebel against that particular situation. So it means accepting what's happened to you and just go on with your life. But it's worked out very, very positive for him. Dr. Applin mentioned UCLA. I got to tell you, you know, Jim Herrick is the head basketball coach at UCLA, and he's become a good friend because he's been with my son for 7 years out there, and he's been like surrogate family to him. But I remember 2 and 3 years ago, I was saying to Jim Herrick, and it's part of this business as well. We're all under pressure. I face more pressure now in this than I probably did in coaching, from a budgetary standpoint to how well your teams do, from a, you know, a PR standpoint, et cetera, like that. And I told him about 2 or 3 years ago, I said, Jim, they're going to fire you here. And they had tried to fire him many times, but he always won 23, 24 games. I said, you ought to take another job. You're the UCLA basketball coach. You can get most any job in the country because of where you're at, because ultimately they will fire you out there. He never thought he'd win the national championship, and he ended up, he hung in there. He's got thick skin. He'll get now what's called probably one of those rollover lifetime contracts, which hopefully he can go the 4 or 5 years if, you know, things don't go bad. But I think the valuable lesson I told my son that you've learned from that, you've learned how to handle that pressure. Because sometimes we're all, if things aren't going well, you know, whether it's my job or Dr. Applin's, whoever, you're looking, well, maybe there's something a little bit better on the other side. But there's problems everywhere. I mean, I don't know that any administrator that I've met, trainer that I've met, there's no utopian situations anywhere. So you try to make the best of what situation you have, and then you try to work that political arena around to where it benefits you and your program. I answer directly to the president, and so when I go to a request for him, I've not been turned down once in 11 years, which is, you know, batting pretty good percentage, because I have to go many times. More budget requests or a position or Title IX or whatever it may be. But what I've learned from that, I mean, I learned from him. He's been our university president for 33 years. There's not a president in the nation that survived 33 years. There's not an athletic director or coach can survive 33 years. But those that do are politically in tune, and Colleen knows this from being over there. He is a master politician, knows how to get things done, etc. So I just kind of watched and observed, etc. like that. So I learned from him. I never go to him for a request unless I pass it through his right and his left hand, his secretary, etc., whoever may be very close to the situation. So when I go make my request is pretty well done because somebody has helped me behind the scenes do that. I learned from that. I could have gone many times and been turned down on the initial walking in, or said I need more information, etc. like that. So by working with the lieutenants that, you know, are very, very close to him, I'm still batting a perfect 1,000. And but I won't go to him if I don't think it's going to get done either. So that's where I'm talking about the political arena. It's, you know, you can't bulldoze your way. And I've told our coaches many times where they've needed a request, so you've got to be patient. One time it took almost 9 months to be able to get what we needed, you know, for that particular program, but ultimately we did do that. So that's been a valuable lesson. I didn't know, you know, prior to getting involved in the administrative role here. And so I feel I'm much better prepared, you know, than I was prior to that. Football, being in the South, and I mentioned this to Dr. Applin, you know, touched base on, we do not have intercollegiate football. We're 8 programs for men, 8 for women, but we're going to try to start it, hopefully. I was hoping that we'd have it off the ground by the fall of '95, but you know, we had some other you know, concerns that took precedent on that. I've made a proposal to our president to get into football where we would not use any university dollars at all. We would test the market for a year and see what we could raise in terms of the community, what we could raise in terms of, I had a company come from Western Pennsylvania that's in the skybox business to take a look at the Ladd Stadium, and they could add 30 skyboxes on this side opposite the press boxes that would generate $15,000 per year per skybox. We looked at that. So the whole proposal is not to use a dollar of university money because it would never fly on our campus at this particular time with budgetary situations tight, needing more, you know, in academic community, and I'm sensitive to that, to the academic faculty. I had tenure as an academic faculty person at Ashland, so I am sensitive to what goes on, and I'm very sensitive to our faculty needs. So it would strictly be a proposal to raise it outside the university. We would, hopefully, we're going to, if we can get it done, it'll be club football in the fall of '96, then '97, '98, '99, and maybe the year 2000 we would be 1AA, and then by the year 2001 we would go 1A. In the Mobile, Baldwin County area, the community would not support football if it were not at the 1A level. They'd support it temporarily. But if you read our media, you know, Auburn, Alabama football, I mean, you don't know there's Notre Dame football or there's Michigan football. I mean, it's Auburn, Alabama. So people traditionally have been in tune to major college football. So we would have to go in that direction. We would try to hire a high-profile coach right from day one. So there would be a message out there that our institution is interested in college football, in going in that direction. So that's a project that we've been working on for over a year and a half. We're hopefully going to have a new building on our campus at some time in the very near future, and I'm hoping that would be within a period of 3 to 5 years, and we would be able to raise money in the community for that also by selling seats, putting skyboxes in. I don't think you can build buildings today without putting skyboxes in. Whether it's an indoor arena, outdoor arena, or whatever, that's where there's so much money generated today. We could, if there would be a way to put them in the Civic Center, you know, we would try to do it, but there's no feasible way to do that. But by building a building, we would try to incorporate that, at least to get 15 to 16 of those skyboxes. Now, give you an example, Louisville, they put, I think there are 13 skyboxes on each side in Freedom Hall. I think there's that many, I'm not sure, 12 or 13. And they had no idea when they average 19,000 people at a game, so their basketball is in demand. They're going to have the best opportunity to sell skyboxes than anyone. But they had no idea how much to sell, advertise. I think they advertised at $32,000 per year. They sold them within 3 weeks. Now, you can't get that many seats in that small area to make up that difference financially, so that's where the skyboxes are critical. And you can get, I think, 16 chairs right in front of your skybox. They got them right down low in the mid-court level, I mean, like halfway up. Some of the pro arenas, they're building them way up the top. They're still selling them, but they're not the best seats. In our building, if we could put it together, we would try to do it halfway up, so you get them, you know, circling your building down there. And that's where the companies will pay the additional dollars, you know, to have that. So the skyboxes are an area that we're looking at to generate revenue for our programs as well. Rambled on very quickly. Do you have any questions at all? Yes.
The governor yesterday announced budgets for next year. How do you see that affecting the program?
It impacted the last time. Whenever there's proration, and they're talking maybe 17 to 18% of higher education, taking the money from higher education and putting it in K through 12, in K through 12 obviously needs more money. So if that 17% is reflected per institution, we would be affected, and it's reflected on how much budgetary money dollars you have. We get hit pretty hard the last time, so we'll be affected same as the library or the academic community. Again, it puts more pressure on us because what the NCAA has done, you used to be able to have token programs. In other words, you could put a cross-country team together and take 5 of your volleyball players or 5 of your baseball players and just throw them in a car and say you have a cross-country team. See, we have to have 7 sports for men and 7 for women. But you also have to fund those at a level. You have to have so many scholarships per sport. You have to compete in so many matches or games per sport. So you can't have token programs. So if the proration comes, then it affects us that we've got to go out and generate more dollars, or we've got to cut back a little bit. We're almost at the bare bone in a lot of our operational programs, operational dollars. But we did it the last time, and somehow we try to get through it. That's always there. Yes.
Can you see yourself, I mean the university, establishing any relationships with the hockey team that's coming into town?
It's another, so we got 3 pro teams in there. We have to, because we have to share the same facility. And our development person that we're trying to put together a program, external funding, she would also approach the hockey team. She would also approach the revelers and see if there's a way where she can incorporate maybe all 3 of us together in some capacity in terms, you go to IBM or you go to Coke or you go to Pepsi, corporate dollars, and maybe channel it that way. But we have to work together, especially sharing the facility like we have to. They're going to have 40 dates, or I think 40 dates maybe. We've always had a problem getting prime time, and it's going to be a more difficult time for us now. It's going to force us at some point to build a building. Yes?
As far as being able to get the job as assistant in South Alabama, what was your background besides coaching?
That was it. I was strictly coaching. And I did not know the athletic director, who was the basketball coach and the athletic director. I knew no one here. I mean, this was really a long shot for me. But the fact that I had coached, and he was a basketball coach and I was a basketball coach, we had good rapport right off, but I had no background to really be the assistant athletic director.
Do you think that could happen today?
I don't know. It depends what's your role in that position. I was running the day-to-day operation at that time. So I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but it depends on what the job description calls for. Yes.
How many interns do you have in the program, and what areas do you cover? Do you have one?
How many interns do you have in the program?
We have 2 interns, one in sports information, I'm sorry, 3, and then sports medicine, and then we have Julie's, one of your graduates here, and she does a little bit of hodgepodge everything, academics, compliance, and administration.
Is there a ratio related to gender equity?
Is there a ratio in terms of gender equity?
That it has to be female or male, or is it equal to the best of qualified? Gender
Yeah.
equity has to do with it.
It's really, according to the way our attorney interpreted it, it's really the best qualified. As long as you can show in terms that you hired the most qualified person, we're basing it on that. But I'm very sensitive to trying to get more females in our program. And I think if everything were equal in that position, I'd try to get more females. Because you still need the role models like track. We're going to hire a head track coach. And I'd like to hire a female for our female track, but we're finding there's not a lot of role models. There's not a lot of role models. There's not a lot of sports information people that are females. So, the young girls coming along, they don't see a role model in that position, much like in track. So somewhere, it's got to start. Hopefully we can find somebody that's very, very qualified. Yes?
In relation to that, do you say, I know earlier that you said that you had to be more tenured as a faculty member. Do you see the gender equity, or you may not deal with it as much at all, but in relation to the academic faculty in South Alabama, or maybe within your own program, do you see the gender equity also enveloping other issues like minorities and disabled individuals as well?
No question. That's all part of it. Yeah, we're very, very, very sensitive to that part. you hit on something there. I was going to say on gender equity. Oh, the football part of it. This is a major topic right now. I didn't even mention the football. If we had football, we're talking about 85 to 100 males. Now, how do you balance that to try to find that many more programs for females financially? How do you do that? The SEC is preparing that now. They're doing that. They're either eliminating some male programs, they're starting a lot more female programs because they think that football is going to be accountable part of it. I talked to a person that spent 29 years with Title IX, OCR, Office of Civil Rights. He says it's not going to be part of it, that football will not be part of that mix. Football should be exempted because really there's no way to match those numbers because you have no matching sport. And what will happen if football does become part of that, then you'll find you're going to have to eliminate male programs. In other words, if we started football and that became part of it, then we would have to probably cut out large numbers of male sports. I mean, you'd hate to cut baseball. We're 16th in the country at one point, but you'd have to look at numbers to try to match or try to come up with more money to add more sports for women. So hopefully it's somewhere along the way football will not be part of that.
Football normally pays the lion's share of the athletic budget in most universities. Why wouldn't you suspect that football could generate enough revenue to add the additional women's sports that you would need to somewhat counterbalance the numbers?
Well, maybe somewhere down the future. I think there are only maybe 20 schools in the country that can say they're doing that now, that are high-profile football programs. You take schools in the Mid-American, Miami, Kent, I mean, they unless you're drawing 55,000 plus, I think it's almost impossible to do that. Auburn, Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State probably can do that. I just don't know how many other schools can. Television has played a major role in intercollegiate athletics with a $1.7 billion contract. Football playoff is going to generate some more. See, what's happened right now, the 80 football playing institutions, and we're battling this right now with them, they're trying to get the majority of members on the committees, the council, the president's commission. Ultimately, their objective is to get control of that $1.7 billion basketball contract, that it's funneled more to the 80 schools where they can help fund the general.
Joe, you mentioned the politics of this local area. What impact does Mardi Gras have on your athletic programs? And I know that that's a competition for the dollar, but can you be more specific?
Yeah, and we can't verbally and publicly be critical of Mardi Gras because it's traditional, that's the area. But it kills us in basketball because we lose the home court advantage usually the last 3 weeks of the season. This year, for example, we beat Jacksonville, who was second in the country. We weren't very good. We beat Jacksonville second in our league. We came right back, beat Louisiana Tech second in our league. Now we're starting to go on a roll. Mardi Gras comes in, we have to go on the road for 3 straight weeks, and then we play our tournament, and we're beat up. So a lot of teams finish at home. We can't ever finish at home for the most part because of Mardi Gras. We don't get to practice in there. We don't play in there. So it does. It's scheduling. It's a major problem. Mardi Gras has prime dates during the year, sometimes on Saturday nights for balls, not just during Mardi Gras season, during the other part of the year. We only play usually one Saturday night a year, and that's where you generate most of your revenue. We either have to play on Sunday afternoon or during the week, and it's hard to draw young kids that have families that live in West Mobile and drive 13 miles downtown and go back, and then you got to get the kids up for school in the morning. So it major impacts us tremendously. But again, we don't say anything about it because we get killed politically. So bite your lip.
Would you ever consider swimming and gymnastics?
Yes. Swimming has been talked about in our recreation center. We're looking at some point in the future of knocking that wall out. It's designed to add swimming, and you can put the numbers in there. For example, we would, if where we have to go to more female participants, swimming is the sport we would start up. Gymnastics hasn't been discussed, but swimming has. Yes.
Building new facilities constantly. You're only a 33-year-old university. At what point down the road do you think that you would need to hire an assistant athletic director in charge of facilities like the University of Florida has in Shelby?
Need it right now. I mean, we really need somebody in place for the long-range planning to do nothing but that. I'm kind of hodgepodging it in amongst the many other things that I try to do. So hopefully it'll be very soon. Yeah. his facilities are very, I mean, you got to be on top of that. Well, it's been a pleasure for me to be here today, and hopefully good luck to all of you. Thank you.
The person he was talking about was Cliff Ellis, and at that time the University of South Alabama was competing at NIT and NCAA. But basically, they were, outside of that basketball and baseball, there practically were not sports at the University of South Alabama. They were what you refer to as token programs. And the building, the establishment of the programs, all of that has really been a credit to the work that Joe has done when he was there, and I think that you need to be aware of some of the things that are going on and the building that he's been able to put together while he's been athletic director there. Thanks, Jim. Next,
I think because I want to get that guy's back into it. You're going to roll, take reasons, Dina.